Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss the Istanbul Convention against Violence Against Women. Allow me first of all to point to the unbelievable irony of this convention bearing the name of the Turkish capital. Just a few days ago, indeed, a law was adopted by that government annulling offences against female minors if men who committed the offences married their women. This is degrading.
And now, Madam Atkinson, you have the floor for a minute and a half.
You're not addressing the silent agenda, and I don't call on anyone in here to do anything, because you cover up the fact that young migrants, often of Muslim backgrounds, are overrepresented in the violence against women statistics, which, by the way, is not the same as claiming that all Muslim migrants are prone to this type of behaviour. Their crimes against women each year. In my country, female genital mutilation, 5,700 reported cases. Honour killings, around a dozen. Polygamy, around 20,000 illegal marriages. Forced marriage, 1,200 reported each year. Child marriages, 5,000 to 8,000. And all this is done in the shadow of Sharia law. It took years before the Rotherham child abuse case was brought to light in the UK, out of fear of being labelled racist. In the UK, we still have a parallel society of Sharia courts operating right under our noses. In fact, all over Europe, we see the same pattern. Those claiming to champion women's rights are in denial and attempt to sweep this problem under the carpet. No amount of EU law or funds will make a difference until this is addressed. The truth is that by letting millions of young migrant men with Muslim backgrounds into our countries, we have submitted our women to these attacks. It's a form of terrorism. No more cover-ups, no more mitigating circumstances, no more political correctness. Like President-elect Trump, I would like more scrutiny of those you're letting in. But in the EU, that won't happen. So in order to protect our women, we need to drain the EU swamp and then make Europe great again.
What is this noise, ladies and gentlemen? If you have an opinion, please voice your opinion in a normal manner, rather than making these background noises. Would Madam Atkinson accept a blue card from Miss Girling? Would you accept the blue card?
Yes. Girling képviselő asszony, öné a szó.
Madam Girling, go ahead then, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, reluctant as I am to offer Madam Atkinson the opportunity to spout more of her vile views, I do feel compelled to ask her, does she believe that in the UK, of which she appears to be so fond, that violence against women is a very recent thing that's only occurred with immigration from Muslim countries, or will she acknowledge that violence against women has been a scourge in our society for centuries?
Of course, Mrs. Girling, I accept that. I've been fighting against this type of violence all my life as a woman who's actually been affected by violence in the home and on the street. My statistics are government statistics, but it is a fact, whether you like it or not, and that's why our government is having an investigation at the moment into Sharia law. Until we actually address the problems, and we address that it is the Muslim migrants that are coming into our countries because of open borders, and that's why you'll be going, madam. You'll be leaving this chamber because we voted for Brexit, and because you all wonder why the populists are on the rise in America and in Holland, in our countries, because of people like you and them across there.
The next speaker has the floor for 1 minute, Mr. Briois.
Dear colleagues, we're talking about the Istanbul Convention and accession, but that doesn't let you off looking at the situation of women's rights at the moment, because you've allowed Islamic fundamentalism to prosper in Europe, and they are supporting polygamy and forced marriage and Sharia law. You are the people who've organized the migratory flows to the European Union through relocating migrants with, as a consequence, an explosion in sexual aggression, such as in Cologne last year. And finally, you're supporting Turkey's accession to the European Union. And I would recall that the Turkish government just a few days ago was talking about allowing people to marry their victim if they've raped someone and get them off the sentence that way. So we need to reassure women and make sure that they have the right to be safe. And in conclusion, I would say that this accession is contrary to the sovereignty of member states, and the European Union has no right to impose on member states this convention.
I now give the floor to Beatrix von Storch.
Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President. The European Commission wants the EU to accede to the Istanbul Convention as a state. We reject violence against women. We all do that, and we need no convention. That's not what it's about. The Istanbul Convention wants to establish that the gender of a person is a social construct that, well, it comes about by the person themselves, by education, by the moon and the stars and the tides. The person makes himself God. This is all nonsense, ladies and gentlemen. And if you agree with that, if you go along with that nonsense, then that's no good. This convention wants all national legislation to be pinned down to this utter bullshit. It is the scourge of this century. It is just a pile of trash, and it belongs on the trash heap of history.
Colleague, just because we have different opinions doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't listen in respect to one another.
Mrs. Montel, 1.5 minutes.
Mes chers collègues, nous sommes ici pour
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss the Istanbul Convention against violence against women. Allow me first of all to point to the unbelievable irony of this convention bearing the name of the Turkish capital. Just a few days ago, indeed, a law was adopted by that government annulling offences against female minors if men who committed the offences married their women. This is degrading. The deterioration of the condition of women in countries is unacceptable. The status of women is falling back. Islamic fundamentalism is getting rooted in, and attacks on physical integrity of women are reaching tragically high levels. In France alone, one woman falls victim to violence every 40 minutes. The free trade agreement which the Commission is negotiating, or the laws imposed on member states, such as the one in France, make female workers' situations more insecure. You signed up to those socially regressive laws. The FN in France refuses these gross attacks on the status of women, and throughout this Parliament and the presidential campaign ahead of us, we will fight alongside Marine Le Pen for the situation of women finally to improve.
Madam Montel, do you accept a blue card from Madam Corazza Bildt?
Présidente, je constate avec regret.
President, I note with regret that our extreme right colleagues from France, the populists, are using women who have fallen victim to violence as a campaigning tool, which is a scandal. And I would like to ask the following question. What do you say to the thousands, the millions of women, white or not white, who have fallen victim to violence, sexual violence, who have been beaten, have been killed by white men, European men, men from the Western world? Your question is bereft of meaning. Mrs. Le Pen is fighting a very dynamic campaign. You'll see a significant number and a growing number of women will vote to support Marine Le Pen, who is the only candidate standing up for women in the presidential elections now in France.
Na hát, hogyha ilyen jól megkérdeztük és meg is kaptuk a választ.
Now, a question has been asked and has now been answered.
I give the floor now to Ms. Vallina. Thank you, Madam President. The Istanbul Convention recognizes violence against women as a violation of human rights. It is doubtless an enormous step forward to adopt political and judicial measures against gender-based violence. You are not born an abuser, you become an abuser. In my country, at least 40 women have been murdered, and it's a pity that Ms. Atkinson has left, because I would have to tell her that 40 women were murdered by Christians. It's not a question of religion, it's not a question of race, it's not a question of economic or cultural reasons. Every second counts, and this is why we need, as a matter of urgency, governments to take this seriously and show real political will to address this problem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Violence against women is not a private issue. It is a serious crime and widespread. Behind every victim, there's a heartbreaking story of a broken life. Too many women and girls today live in fear and despair, bleeding in their minds and body, hurt, crushed by guilt and shame. I visited shelters from Sweden to Greece, witnessing amazing civil society taking women and girls by hand to recover their dignity and rebuild their life. But still, at home, women continue to be beaten, and often children witness terrible scenes. In public, even going to a swimming pool or to a music festival becomes a danger to be harassed or raped. And in the social media, persecution has become a global phenomenon affecting an entire generation. Let's be clear, often it is men attacking women out of jealousy, frustration, alcohol, revenge. Often they just can't accept a woman to be strong, independent, modern, making her own choices and dare to live them. Time has come to say no to sexism and to build a culture of respect for women and girls, and religion and culture can never be an excuse to abuse women.